The wind howled through the trees, its icy fingers clawing at the walls of Marcus Chen's remote cabin. The former search and rescue officer sat in his favorite chair, a weathered leather piece that had seen him through countless winter nights, his eyes fixed on the dancing flames in the fireplace. Outside, the blizzard raged with unprecedented fury, transforming the familiar forest into an alien landscape of white. Marcus took a slow sip of his tea, the warmth spreading through his chest as he listened to the storm. 3 days had passed since the blizzard had cut him off from the nearest town, but solitude didn't bother him. After 15 years of pulling people from nature's deadliest situations, he'd learned to appreciate the quiet moments. The grandfather clock in the corner struck midnight, its deep chimes echoing through the cabin. Marcus was about to head to bed when something caught his attention, a sound different from the storm's constant roar. He lowered his cup, his body tensing as years of training kicked in. There it was again, a desperate scratching, followed by what sounded like a whimper. Marcus rose slowly, his joints protesting the sudden movement. The sound was coming from his back door, the one that led to his covered porch. As he approached, the scratching grew more urgent, accompanied by heavy panting that fogged the glass panel of the door. Through the frost-covered window, Marcus made out a shape that made his heart skip a beat. A husky stood there, her thick coat covered in ice and snow. But it wasn't just her. Pressed against her sides were 3 tiny forms, puppies no more than a few weeks old, their small bodies shivering violently in the cold. "Dear God," Marcus breathed, his hand already reaching for the door handle. The husky's eyes met his, and in them he saw a desperation that transcended species, the desperate plea of a mother trying to save her children. Shepard ported them level and waved toward the front door. Without hesitation, Marcus pulled the door open. The wind rushed in, bringing with it a swirl of snow and bitter cold. The husky didn't move immediately, her body curved protectively around her puppies as she assessed the man before her. Her ribs showed through her matted fur, and old scars peeked through where her coat had thinned. "It's okay," Marcus said softly, crouching down to appear less threatening. His voice, practiced from years of calming frightened victims, remained steady and gentle. "Come on, girl. Let's get you and your little ones out of this cold." The husky took a tentative step forward, nudging one of her puppies with her nose. The tiny creature stumbled, its legs weak from cold and exhaustion. Without thinking, Marcus reached out to help, but the mother's low growl stopped him short. It wasn't aggressive, more of a warning, a mother's instinct to protect her young. All right, Marcus murmured, backing up slightly. "You're in charge here, take your time." Slowly, painfully slowly, the husky guided her puppies inside. Each step seemed to cost her tremendous effort, but her focus never wavered from her children. Once they were all inside, Marcus carefully closed the door, shutting out the howling wind. The husky led her puppies toward the fireplace, her movements cautious but deliberate. She settled them near the warmth, her body still curved around them protectively. In the firelight, Marcus could better see their condition. The puppies were tiny, their eyes only recently opened, and their ribs visible beneath their thin puppy fur. The mother's condition was even worse. Her once proud frame showed signs of prolonged malnutrition and exposure. Marcus moved to the kitchen, his mind racing. He filled a bowl with warm water and grabbed some leftover chicken from his dinner. When he returned to the living room, the husky watched his every move, her body tense but her eyes showing a glimmer of hope. He placed the water and food at a careful distance, then backed away. "Easy now," he said softly. "You're safe here." The husky's nose twitched at the smell of food, but she didn't move. Instead, she began cleaning her puppies, her tongue gently washing away the snow and ice that clung to their fur. Only when she was satisfied with their condition did she carefully stretch her neck toward the water bowl, taking careful sips while keeping her body between her puppies and Marcus. As Marcus watched this display of maternal devotion, questions swirled in his mind. Where had she come from? How long had she been out in the storm? And most importantly, what had happened to leave her in such a state? The puppies, warmed by the fire and their mother's presence, began to whimper softly, seeking milk. The husky settled back down, allowing them to nurse as she kept her tired eyes on Marcus. Her gaze held a mixture of wariness and desperation, the look of someone who had learned the hard way not to trust, but who had no choice but to accept help. "You've been through hell, haven't you?" Marcus whispered, settling back in his chair. The husky's ears twitched at his voice, but she didn't move. Her focus remained on her puppies, watching as they fed with the single-minded determination of the very young. As the night wore on, Marcus found himself unable to sleep, his eyes drawn repeatedly to the unexpected guests by his fireplace. The husky had finally allowed herself to rest, though her ears still twitched at every creak and groan of the cabin settling in the cold. Her puppies slept soundly, their tiny bodies rising and falling with each breath, secure in their mother's warmth. Marcus's mind wandered to his years in search and rescue, to the countless times he'd witnessed both the cruelty and kindness of fate. He'd seen miracles unfold in the harshest conditions, but there was something different about this, something that tugged at his heart in a way he hadn't felt since losing his own dog Shadow 2 years ago. As dawn approached, the storm finally began to ease, its fury spent. The first rays of morning light filtered through the frost-covered windows, casting long shadows across the cabin floor. The husky stirred, her ice-blue eyes opening to scan her surroundings. For a moment, fear flickered across her face, but as recognition dawned, her body relaxed slightly. Oliver rose. "Morning, girl," Marcus said softly from his chair. He'd dozed off and on throughout the night, unwilling to leave them alone. The husky's gaze met his, and this time there was something different in her eyes, a tentative acceptance, perhaps even trust. Moving slowly, Marcus made his way to the kitchen. He could hear the puppies beginning to wake, their small whimpers filling the quiet morning air. As he prepared some warm food for the mother, he glanced back to see her gently nuzzling each pup, checking them over with careful attention. "You're quite the mother," he murmured, setting down a bowl of warm food mixed with some leftover meat. This time the husky approached more readily, though she still kept herself between Marcus and her puppies. As she ate, Marcus noticed more details about her condition. The way she favored her right hind leg, the small notch in her ear that spoke of past fights, the collar marks around her neck where fur had been worn away. "Someone had you before," he said quietly, his jaw tightening. "And they didn't treat you right, did they?" The husky paused in her eating, looking up at him with those piercing blue eyes. There was an intelligence there, an understanding that made Marcus's heart ache. He'd seen it before in abused animals, the wariness, the fear, but also the desperate hope for kindness. After breakfast, Marcus knew he needed to assess their condition more thoroughly. The puppies, while weak, seemed alert and responsive, their tiny tails beginning to wag as they explored their immediate surroundings. The mother watched them carefully, never letting them stray too far from her sight. "We need to get you checked out," Marcus told her, reaching for his satellite phone. The regular lines were down from the storm, but he kept the satellite phone for emergencies. Dr. Sarah Reynolds, the local vet, answered on the third ring. "Sarah, it's Marcus. I've got a situation here. A husky and 3 pups showed up at my door last night. They're in rough shape, but the mother's wary. Any chance you could make a house call?" The silence on the other end spoke volumes. Sarah knew Marcus wouldn't call unless it was important. "The roads are still pretty bad," she said finally, "but I can try to make it out there by afternoon. Keep them warm and comfortable until then." As Marcus hung up, he noticed the husky watching him intently, as if she understood that help was coming. Her puppies had begun to show more energy, attempting wobbly steps on the wooden floor. One of them, the smallest, stumbled and let out a surprised yelp. Before Marcus could move, the mother was there, gently nudging the pup back to its feet. "You're safe here," Marcus found himself saying again, though whether he was reassuring the husky or himself he wasn't sure. What he did know was that watching this mother's dedication to her puppies, her strength in the face of whatever hardships she'd endured, stirred something in him that he thought had frozen over when Shadow died. The morning passed slowly as Marcus maintained his careful distance, allowing the family to adjust to their new environment. He noticed how the mother's eyes would occasionally dart to the windows, scanning for threats, and how she would tense at unexpected sounds. Yet, with each passing hour, her posture became slightly more relaxed, her vigilance less desperate. The afternoon brought a break in the clouds and the sound of an approaching vehicle. The Husky's ears perked up instantly, her body tensing as she gathered her puppies closer. Marcus moved to the window and recognized Sarah's old blue truck making its way up his snow-covered driveway. "It's all right," he assured the Husky, keeping his voice calm. "She's here to help." "I'll meet you help." Sarah Reynolds had been the local veterinarian for over 2 decades, and her experience with anxious animals showed in her careful movements as she entered the cabin. She took one look at the Husky and her puppies and let out a soft whistle. "You weren't kidding about their condition," she said quietly to Marcus, setting down her medical bag. The Husky watched her warily, a low growl rumbling in her throat when Sarah took a step closer. "She's been through a lot," Marcus explained, crouching down near the fireplace. "Found them last night in the storm. The puppies can't be more than 3 weeks old." Sarah nodded, her experienced eyes taking in every detail. "Let's give her some time to get used to me. Tell me everything you've noticed." As Marcus described the previous night's events, Sarah listened intently, occasionally making notes. The Husky's eyes darted between them, her body remaining protectively curved around her puppies, but her growls gradually subsided as she realized they weren't making any moves toward her. "Based on what you're describing," Sarah said finally, "and what I can see, she's likely been on her own for at least a few weeks. Those scars aren't new, and that notch in her ear—" "Marcus, I think I know where she came from." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "Brad, remember those rumors about the illegal breeding operation up in the North Woods, the one the police have been trying to locate?" Sarah's voice was tight with controlled anger. "We've been getting dogs coming in with similar injuries. They're usually Huskies or Malamutes, always in terrible condition." The Husky's eyes seemed to focus more intently on them, as if she understood they were talking about her past. One of her puppies squeaked softly, and she immediately turned her attention to it, gently nuzzling the tiny creature. "Let me try something," Sarah said, reaching into her bag. She pulled out some treats and a small blanket. "These are special calming treats. If she takes them, it might help us examine her and the pups." Moving with deliberate slowness, Sarah placed a treat near the Husky, then backed away. The dog's nose twitched, and after a moment's hesitation, she carefully took the treat. Sarah repeated this process several times, each time moving slightly closer. Finally, after what seemed like hours, the Husky allowed Sarah to drape the blanket near her puppies. The warmth and soft texture seemed to comfort them, and their tiny tails began to wag as they snuggled into it. "She's smart," Sarah remarked, carefully examining each puppy from a respectful distance. "She knows we're trying to help. The puppies are underweight but active. Good muscle tone considering. They're fighters like their mother." As Sarah worked, Marcus noticed something he hadn't seen before. A faint pattern shaved into the Husky's fur. Mostly grown out now, but still visible when the light hit it right. "Sarah," he called softly, "look at this." The vet leaned closer, careful not to startle their patient. "That's a registration number," she said grimly. "They mark their breeding dogs this way. I'll report it to the authorities. It might help them track down the operation." The Husky watched them intensely, her blue eyes holding a depth of understanding that made Marcus's heart ache. She had escaped from that place, carrying her puppies through the wilderness, fighting against the elements and exhaustion, all to find safety for her children. "You're quite the survivor," Sarah said softly to the Husky. "Now, let's see about getting you and your little ones back to health." The examination continued with gentle patience, Sarah explaining everything she was doing in a soft, soothing voice. The Husky, though still cautious, seemed to sense the vet's genuine desire to help. She allowed Sarah to check her puppies more closely, only whimpering slightly when they were lifted for their examinations. "They'll need special formula to supplement their feeding," Sarah explained, writing out instructions for Marcus. "The mother's been malnourished, and it's affecting her milk production, but with proper care they should all recover fully. As Sarah packed up her supplies, she paused, looking at Marcus thoughtfully. You know, they'll need a permanent home once they're stronger. Somewhere safe, with someone who understands what they've been through. Marcus met the Husky's gaze, seeing in those ice-blue eyes a reflection of his own loneliness. I think, he said quietly, they might have already found it. The Husky's tail moved slightly, just a small wag, but in that simple gesture, Marcus saw the first real sign of trust. As Sarah drove away, leaving him with medicine, supplies, and care instructions, Marcus settled back in his chair, watching as the mother tenderly cared for her puppies in the warmth of the fireplace. We'll get through this together, he promised softly. You're home now. But even as he spoke those words, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that their story wasn't over yet. Somewhere out in those woods, the people who had hurt this beautiful creature were still operating, still causing pain. And sooner or later, that darkness would come looking for what it had lost. The next few days fell into a gentle rhythm as Marcus, the Husky, and her puppies adjusted to their new life together. The mother's vigilance slowly eased, though she never fully let her guard down. Marcus noticed how her eyes would still dart to the windows at unexpected sounds, how her body would tense at the crack of a branch in the forest. He'd taken to calling her Luna after the way her white fur seemed to glow in the moonlight. The puppies, growing stronger each day, he named Aurora, Storm, and Spirit, the last being the smallest but most determined of the trio. Luna had accepted the names with what Marcus could have sworn was approval, her tail wagging softly whenever he spoke them. One crisp morning, about a week after Luna's arrival, Marcus was chopping wood near the cabin when he noticed something that made his blood run cold. Tracks in the snow, human footprints. That hadn't been there the day before. Circling the perimeter of his property, Luna must have sensed his unease because she appeared at the doorway, her puppies safely inside. Her hackles raised as she caught an unfamiliar scent, a low growl rumbling in her throat. Inside, girl, Marcus commanded softly, gathering his axe and heading toward the cabin. Once inside, he called Sarah, who connected him with the local sheriff's department. They had been building a case against the suspected breeding operation for months, and Marcus's discovery of Luna had provided valuable evidence. We've got patrols in the area, the sheriff assured him, but be careful, Marcus. These people, they're not just animal abusers. They're organized, and they don't like losing their investment. That night, Marcus sat by the window, his old service rifle within reach. Luna lay near the fire with her puppies, but her eyes remained fixed on the door, her body tense with anticipation. The wind had picked up again, carrying with it the promise of another storm. It was just past midnight when Luna's head shot up, her ears forward and alert. Marcus heard it too, the crunch of snow under boots, more than one set of footsteps. He moved silently to the window, his heart pounding as he made out 3 shadows moving through the darkness. Luna, he whispered, back room. Now, to his surprise, she obeyed immediately, gathering her puppies one by one and carrying them to the bedroom. Marcus had barely closed the door behind them when a sharp knock echoed through the cabin. We know you're in there, a rough voice called. You've got something that belongs to us. Marcus's hand tightened on his rifle. This is private property, he called back. Leave now or I'm calling the police. A harsh laugh answered him. By the time they get here, we'll be long gone with our property. Property? Marcus felt rage building in his chest. That dog and her puppies aren't property. They're living beings you abused and abandoned. Last chance, old man. Open up or we're coming in. Marcus had already pressed the emergency signal on his satellite phone, but he knew help would take time to arrive. In the bedroom, he could hear Luna's low growl, protective and fierce. The first crash against the door made the whole cabin shudder. Marcus positioned himself with a clear view of the entrance, his rifle ready. The second crash splintered the frame, but before the third hit could come, a new sound cut through the night. Sirens growing closer. The shadows outside froze, then scattered into the darkness. Moments later, Red and blue lights flooded the clearing as 3 police cars roared up the driveway. What followed was a blur of activity. The police tracked 2 of the men through the snow, while the third was caught trying to circle back to their vehicle. As they were led away in handcuffs, Marcus learned they'd been under surveillance for weeks, suspected of running breeding operations across 3 states. When the chaos finally subsided, Marcus found Luna and her puppies still in the bedroom, the mother standing guard over her sleeping children. As he knelt beside them, Luna did something she'd never done before. She stepped forward and pressed her head against his chest, letting out a soft whine. "It's over," he whispered, wrapping his arms around her thick fur. "They're never going to hurt you again." In the weeks that followed, Luna's transformation was remarkable. The fearful, desperate mother who had scratched at his door that stormy night blossomed into a confident, loving companion. Her puppies grew strong and playful, filling the once quiet cabin with the sound of pattering paws and joyful yips. The investigation led to the discovery of more breeding operations, and many more dogs were rescued. Luna's escape had started a chain reaction that would save countless lives. One evening, as Marcus sat in his favorite chair watching Luna play with her puppies by the fire, he realized something profound. In trying to save them that winter night, he had saved himself as well. The emptiness that had plagued him since losing Shadow had been filled with a new purpose, a new family. Luna looked up at him, her ice-blue eyes now full of trust and contentment. She had found more than just shelter in his cabin. She had found a home, a place where her puppies could grow up safe and loved. And Marcus had found something too, a reminder that even in the darkest storms, hope could scratch at your door, asking to be let in.